If you ask most people to name a famous highwayman, most will reply with the name Dick Turpin. But Dick Turpin, with all due respect, was only a Boy Scout in comparison to the Irish highwaymen. As I was going over the far-famed Kerry Mountains, I met with Captain Farrell and his money he was counting. I first produced my pistol and then produced my rapier, saying, "Stand and deliver, for you are a bold deceiver." The opening lines of the famous Irish ballad Whiskey in the Jar. It was written in the 1700s but rediscovered in the 1950s and 1960s and made popular by folk groups such as the Dubliners.
This ballad recounts the tale of a highwayman, who are also known as bandits, raparies, footpads and Tories, and his betrayal by his woman Jenny. As you listen to the lyrics, you will hear that Jenny filled his gunpowder or charges with water, so he couldn't use his pistols. I'll put a link to this song in the description below. Returning to Willie Brennan, it was said he was born in County Tipperary in the late 1700s and was outlawed for stealing an army officer's watch.
So the concept of being an outlaw is simply that you are beyond the protection of the law, and it meant that any citizen could apprehend you or indeed kill you.
One story told is that he waited in ambush along a road as a man passed leading a pack horse. Brennan drew his weapon and ordered the man to stand and deliver. The man handed over his valuables and a quantity of cash. As it transpired, the man, who was called the Peddler Bawn, was a salesman for a wealthy Cork merchant. As Brennan turned to ride away, the Peddler Bawn pleaded for some evidence to show his boss the fact that he had been robbed, or he himself would be put in prison. Brennan was confused until a peddler asked him to blast his hat with shot from his blunderbuss to show this as evidence. Brennan complied, and the peddler threw his hat into the air, and Brennan blasted it like a sieve, with his firearm discharged. It was then that the Peddler Bawn drew his own pistol, and the tables were turned. Brennan was so impressed with his ingenuity that he asked the peddler to join him on the road, which he did, and the two worked successfully together on many raids before going their separate ways. Another story of Brennan was that one morning he stopped at an isolated cottage to ask for some water. It was the home of a poor widow, who told him that the bailiff was due to collect a £5 rent from her, which she did not have, and she feared being turned out into the road from her house. Brennan could see the worry in her face, and so gave her £5 from his own purse on the condition that the widow get a receipt from the bailiff when he arrived. The widow gratefully agreed, and when the bailiff did arrive, she made sure she got a receipt. The bailiff moved on and collected more rents as the day progressed, and as the bailiff made his way to the main highway, he was suddenly stopped by Brennan with his blunderbuss at the ready. Brennan took the rent money and the bailiff's horse, which he later sold to an accomplice in Clonmel town. So in the end, the widow had her receipt for payment, and Brennan had got his £5 back and more.
So this story I heard told by an American cowboy in Montana on TV one time, and it was set in the Wild West. So it's amazing how a story can travel from Ireland across to the US and be told in a different context. So, good example of how stories can get legs.
But Willie Brennan's most renowned act was to rob the mayor of the Tipperary town of Cashel of a large quantity of gold. This happened about a mile from the town and resulted in a large military force of infantry and cavalry being sent into the area to hunt him down. Despite using the old highwayman's trick of putting his horseshoes on backwards to try and confuse his trackers, he was eventually captured by a small force of redcoats when sleeping, and his horse bolted on the army's approach. As they marched him back to the barracks, the party stopped at a tavern on the way for some ale. Brennan knew the serving girl in the tavern, and removing his clay pipe from his pocket, asked her to, quote, put some fire in it. When the girl returned, she had a pistol concealed in her skirt, and Brennan drew it on the only sentry guarding him and the soldiers' weapons. It was said that Brennan tied up the soldiers and, removing their boots, piled them up and set fire to them to slow them down. With even more heightened military force in the area after this event, Brennan was forced into the more remote roads of West Cork and Kerry. It was on these roads that he stopped a coach containing a Mr. Jeremiah Connor, a solicitor and friend of the great political leader Daniel O'Connell. Connor threw his purse into the road, obliging Brennan to stoop down for it. It was then that Connor drew his own pistol and fired at Brennan, badly wounding him. Brennan crawled back into some heavy undergrowth, and his dead body was found the following day a short distance from the road. This account comes from no less a source and authority than O'Connell himself, but other accounts tell of a different ending to Willie Brennan's life. This account is particularly backed up by the testimony of a Private George Farmer of the 12th Light Dragoons, who was involved in the search and capture of a highwayman in 1809, and gives the following account. Quote, "While a crowd of us gathered about the house, some shouting on Brennan to surrender, others firing at the top of the chimney, a sort of salute to which the robber did not hesitate to answer. One of the Sligo men suddenly called out from the rear that he had pricked a man with his bayonet among the gorse. In an instant a search was made, and sure enough, there lay Brennan himself, on his back in a narrow ditch, with a brace of pistols close beside his feet, of which, however, he did not judge it expedient to make use. He was instantly seized, disarmed, and put in charge of a sufficient guard. It is then stated that he was tried and hanged in Clonmel town. But most agree that Brennan is buried immediately inside the north wall of the old churchyard of Kilcrumper, between Kilworth and Fermoy in County Cork. Willie left behind a wife and 3 children. Just like pirates, there are stories about the booty or treasure hidden by such highwaymen, and Brennan's treasure is reputed to be on Killee Hill in Cork. Said to be a gold statue stolen from a wealthy farmer crossing the Kilworth Mountains, but the exact location was taken to the grave by the bold Willie Brennan.
So there's also a ballad about Willie Brennan called Brennan on the Moor, made famous particularly by a folk group called the Clancy Brothers, and I'll provide a link in the description to the Clancy Brothers playing this on the Ed Sullivan Show in the 1960s. Also, Bob Dylan took the melody of this song and used it in one of his own tracks in 1962 called Gambling Rambling Willie. So there you have it. Willie Brennan, famous in more ways than one.
Thank you for watching, but please like and subscribe, as this will encourage future productions.